1969, the United States had been fighting in Vietnam for 4 years. Richard Nixon, who was elected president on January 11th, pursued this increasingly unpopular war. This is the story of that year, 1969, through the eyes of Dan Love, a young American soldier. Like so many amateur photographers, he unwittingly created a chronicle of his time. We have used the 200 photos he brought back from Vietnam to reconstruct his experiences and thoughts.
It's morning. I'm sitting on the front steps. Dad calls me. Dan! He takes a photo, but I really don't feel like smiling. I'm leaving for Vietnam tomorrow. Mom is sobbing in the kitchen. I go up to my room. Alone in front of the mirror, I press the shutter. This is not my war. I've drawn the short straw. There are 150 of us on the plane. No one speaks. I think about saying goodbye to my folks. Dad tried to reassure me. As a mechanic, he won't be sent to the front. He'll be back in a year, safe and sound. I'd sure like to believe him. The air hostess is kind of pretty. I snap her on the sly. She's from Silver Spring like me. We start joking, and then she tells me her brother has been in Vietnam for 8 months already. She isn't smiling anymore.
In May 1969, Dan Love joined the 500,000 U.S. soldiers fighting inch by inch against an elusive enemy. Despite the massive mobilization, the conflict dragged on. Since the Tet Offensive in January 1968, the general public had understood that the Vietnamese Communist forces could hold their own against the world's strongest army.
Through the lens, I discover Saigon. It's the first time I've ever been out of the United States. What a shock. I'm overwhelmed by the smells and heat. There's no sign of the war here. How can I possibly imagine in this crowd is the enemy I'm supposed to be fighting? Crammed together in trucks, we finally get to Phu Loi military base, a bit of America 15 miles from Saigon. It's hard to tell, but the camp is huge.
Good morning, Vietnam!
All of us are scared, and all of us are 19 or 20 years old. That's all we have in common. The new recruits pose for the camera. Dennis is from Allentown, Jimmy from California, and Sydney from Alabama. Bill, the tattooed guy, hails from New Jersey. He's a real hothead. We're given our welcome packs. They call them toy chests here. I capture the scene. The guys are like kids on Christmas Day. There are landmines, ammo, rockets, and of course, M16 rifles. With all this kit, we should be able to wipe out anyone who gets through the barbed wire around the base.
The Americans were powerless against the Communist forces' guerrilla tactics. In the spring of 1969, the Battle of Hamburger Hill ended in carnage, another failure for the U.S. Army. On June 8th, President Nixon announced a new strategy, the Vietnamization of the war. This involved building up the strength of the South Vietnamese army to facilitate the gradual withdrawal of US troops.
We're not alone on the base. Dozens of Vietnamese live with us. It's weird. We call them Papa San or Mama San. This is Vic, our cleaner. She's furious. She refuses to believe my name is Love. She thinks I'm making fun of her. The fact is, most of the guys here have sex on the brain. In the 1st Aviation Battalion, they call us generator mechanic. We're 15 or so ground mechanics. It's our job to repair the generators, trucks, and choppers. When we got here, the captain said we were the sinews of this war, that our technical superiority would enable us to crush the Viet Cong and wipe out communism. What a pacifist.
Since 1965, the United States had defended South Vietnam against the North Vietnamese communists and their Chinese and Russian allies. This conflict was a new chapter in the Cold War. In the Indochina War, the French had fought for their colonial empire, whereas the Americans were fighting an ideology.
June 30th, my first watch. I photographed the watchtower. Up here, I meet Rick, who's been in Vietnam for a year. He says to me, "Welcome to the real world, man. This is your life now, hiding and taking out guys you don't even know." Rick tells me that last year, during the Tet Offensive, a young soldier was killed here while on night watch. His name was John Shell. He played bass guitar in a rock band. In the mayhem, he was hit by a stray bullet. He'd only been here 2 months. It's crazy. This war is a goddamn lottery, and everyone acts like it's totally normal. July 21st, 1969. I snap another John watching TV. Talk about a weird situation. We're in the middle of Vietnam watching an American walk on the moon. I think of my parents and my buddies back home who, like me, are going to be buzzing all night. Millions of us forget about the war for now.
In July 1969, 500 million people around the world watched live television images of Neil Armstrong taking his first steps on the moon. The Soviet Union refused to broadcast the images. The Cold War was being fought in space, not just in Southeast Asia.
I got a letter from my buddy Dennis with a picture of the whole gang, Marilyn, Tony, and Libby. I miss them. We're with you. We're doing all we can to bring you home. For 17 hours, we read out the names of soldiers killed in Vietnam. America's changing. Everyone is on the streets. Blacks, whites, feminists. We're strong. We'll get you out of there. I stuck the photo of my buddies on my locker. It caused quite a stir. The captain came across it during an inspection. He yelled at me, "Love." "Yes, sir." "What is this bullshit?" "Nothing, sir." "Sure it isn't a hippie giving me the finger? Love?" "No, sir." The captain was on my back for a whole week. I only hope they'll keep up the fight back home to stop this war. August 8th. We're on a transport mission today. Terry's at the wheel and I'm snapping away as usual. We're on our way to Long Binh. I don't like being on the road. Last month, a convoy was ambushed and 4 guys got killed. Terry drives like crazy. I've never seen him so tense. He doesn't say a word. We drive past armed guys. Terry steps on the gas. We have to go hell for leather. If you slow down, you're dead.
Dozens of soldiers died in combat every day. 1,500 were killed in 1965, 15,000 in 1969. These endless images had a huge impact. Every American had a son, a friend, or a neighbor serving in Vietnam.
Sunday is our day off. Some guys write home, others just hang around. I sketch. I didn't even see Terry take my photo. When I've got a pen in my hand, I forget all this shit. The other mechanics don't call me Love anymore, but Peace and Love. The captain cornered me yesterday. He didn't really appreciate the graffiti on my helmet. He very definitely isn't into peace and love. August 30th. I'm on night watch again. I've been paired up with Jimmy. He's in the bunker and I'm in the tower scanning the barbed wire. No one wants to be the guy who lets down his buddies. It forces you to stay awake. It's dawn. Soon we'll be relieved. All of a sudden, I see a ball of fire coming from the trees. Jimmy is stoned again. He keeps shouting, "I don't believe it! Those bastards are shooting at us!" We dive behind the sandbags and check the M60 is loaded and ready. I can feel my heartbeat throughout my body. Behind us, the artillery take out the VC's positions. It goes on for over an hour. There are no losses, but we're badly shaken. That evening, we sit glued to the TV, distraught and in shock. Steppenwolf is playing. Here we listen to it over and over. I've been in Vietnam 4 months now. I've just turned 21. My birthday pics aren't great. I had trouble focusing. The fact is, Uncle Sam keeps the beer flowing and grass is easy to come by. We're constantly stoned. It helps us keep going. Music is like sex. It's good for the troops' morale. Well, that's what the chief thinks. Once a month, groups from Saigon come butcher rock standards. No one dances, and no wonder. At Phu Loi, there are 4,000 guys for 13 nurses. Nixon has just announced another withdrawal of troops, 35,000 men, and I'm still here.
The gradual return of American soldiers was not enough to stem the protests. On November 3, 1969, President Nixon tried to justify his Vietnam policy.
A few weeks ago, I saw demonstrators carrying signs reading, "Lose in Vietnam, bring the boys home." As President of the United States, I would be untrue to my oath of office if I allowed the policy of this nation to be dictated by the minority who hold that point of view and who try to impose it on the nation by mounting demonstrations in the streets.
John Lennon and Yoko Ono are campaigning against the war. Around the world, their posters declare, "War is over if you want it." Over here, most of the guys prefer Marvel's superheroes. Wake up, guys. This war is a disgrace. It isn't the American way.
On November 15th, 500,000 Vietnam War protesters gathered in Washington. Inside the White House, Richard Nixon sat watching a baseball match on TV. America's political class still had not grasped the extent of the protest. A poll in November 1969 showed the majority of Americans were now opposed to the war.
Here's a photo of my new bunk neighbor, Kaminsky. I really don't understand the guy. He's just back from the Delta, where soldiers are dying every day, and yet he says he loves war. He's got a killing card on his helmet. Some guys place these cards on the bodies of guys they've killed to terrify the VCs. They're sick.
In November 1969, America was in shock. Harper's Magazine published an account of the My Lai massacre perpetrated by U.S. soldiers. The revelation of this war crime, which the Chief of Staff had hushed up for over a year, angered public opinion around the world. The United States had not yet lost the war, but they had lost the war of images.
December 20th. I got a letter from my mom and a photo of the Christmas tree. It's kind of dumb, but I'm as happy as a kid. For Christmas, Terry and I have been selected. We're going to Da Nang to see the Bob Hope show. It's my first time in a chopper. Men are killing each other down there, but through the lens, the landscape looks peaceful. Damn, I can hardly see her. I don't have a zoom. Everyone goes wild when Miss World comes on stage. I haven't seen a blonde in over 6 months. It's like I've been given an electric shock.
How about this? If the world was in this kind of shape, you guys wouldn't be here, right?
During the 10-year war, Armed Forces Entertainment organized some 5,000 concerts. World-famous stars such as Nancy Sinatra, John Wayne, and Sammy Davis Jr. performed in Vietnam. Anything to boost the troops' morale.
The guy next to me goes crazy when Neil Armstrong comes on stage. He taps me on the shoulder and says, "When you think the guy who walked on the moon is American, there's no way we won't win this war." Dream on, man.
Thank you, guys. I've been around the world a few times, and I've had a lot of nice, warm receptions, but I've never had a better one than that. Thank you.
February 1970. Another 3 months to go till my Vietnam tour is over. The bad news is I'm being transferred to Dong Tam in the Delta. The land has been scorched by napalm and Agent Orange. How can the VCs survive that terrible stuff? Truck, chopper, truck, 3 days traveling. I'm the oldest in the convoy. You can tell by the state of my boots. On getting to the base, there's an alert. 6 hours in a bunker. I know right away I'm in the wrong place. Every night the Viet Cong pound the base with shells. I meet the hospital doctors. They operate as best they can guys who'll end up in wheelchairs, if they're lucky. In Dong Tam, they say there are two kinds of soldiers, the swift and the dead. I belong to another category, the disillusioned.
In the spring of 1970, American students refused to believe President Nixon's promises anymore. On campuses across the states, the protests became more radical. In April, the U.S. Army invaded Cambodia. Advocates of peace saw the spread of the conflict as a provocation. On May 4th at Kent State University campus, the National Guard opened fire on the demonstrators.
4 students killed in the United States. Will Nixon finally listen to us and end this war? I've got to know Leo Stein, a young doctor from Tucson. This guy's a genius. He graduated as a doctor at 24 and already has a fiancée. Leo is against this war, but he's proud to come treat us GIs. Once he's seen the operating theater and the wounded, he won't be so cheerful. My stomach's been in knots all day. When I put on my boots, a card stuck to the sole fell off. It's a killing card, a bad omen. I'm trying to convince myself it's bullshit, just superstition. But what if my number is up? The rocket landed just 3 feet from the operating theater. Miraculously, I wasn't hurt. There are 4 wounded and 1 dead. The sergeant comes to see how I am. He tells me the victim's name was Leo Stein. He'd only just got here. Like an idiot, I say to the sergeant, "It should have been me." Then I bawl my eyes out. June 30th, 1970. The day has come at last. I don't feel any sense of relief, though. I wanted to fight against this war, but I don't believe in anything anymore. When I get home, Mom will be waiting at the door. "Dan, my son, you're alive." Alive? I'm not so sure.
Five years after Dan Love returned home, the Vietnam War ended on April 30th, 1975, triggering an unprecedented moral and political crisis. This humiliating defeat would influence U.S. foreign policy for years. Thousands of vets are still suffering from the side effects of Vietnam, like Dan Love, whose cancer was caused by Agent Orange. The Vietnam War still haunts America.